punch my ass.
I'm only 4. Bonjour, Monsieur Pussycat.
Cracking toast, Robert.
Start spreading the news.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the short podcast about short films. I'm your host, and we are discussing the Academy Award for Best Animated Short. Today's episode is about the 51st year of the award at the 55th Academy Awards, which celebrates the films of 1982. Today's guest is everyone's favorite frequent guest. You last heard him discussing the infamous Crunchbird and the nominees of 1971. Please welcome back Christof. Hello, Christof.
Hello, American Pig, and thank you for having me back.
It's an honor to keep inviting you back to this podcast, and we always have such great films to talk about. Well, not always great films, but they're great to talk about.
Yes.
But remind us, just for those who don't know, what is your familiarity with this category, the Best Animated Short category?
It's one of my favorite categories. I've seen all the available nominees, and I like many of them.
Yes. There are many to like in this category.
Including one or two we're talking about today.
Yes. And I think we're both like just kind of eager to get into this category already. It's just like I don't want to spoil too much, but this is one we've been excited to talk about, along with like the Crunchbird, and the next episode we have lined up it's just like you picked these episodes far in advance, and it's like when I was first planning the category, it's just like you gave me a few episodes that you wanted to talk about, and this was one of those early ones, like Crunchbird, this, and the upcoming Balance episode.
Actually, this wasn't actually one I had initially. I think
Really?
we discussed it, but I left it free for maybe other takers, and we decided rather late that we should finally snatch this one as well.
Oh yes, I'm remembering now. It's because you didn't want to have 2 episodes in the same decade, though you did want to talk about this episode. And I did for a moment think about like actually inviting Zbig Ripczynski onto the podcast because he is still alive. He's still active. I don't think he's making films anymore, but he's still working. But I decided against it. And so that meant might as well just give Christof another episode. And this will be the only decade where you get 2 episodes in it. So
yes.
So yeah, let's just get into these nominees. And this year has only 3. Our first nominee and the year's winner is Tango, directed by Zbigniew Ripczynski. This is Ripczynski's first and only nomination and win. Let's start with the basics. Zbig Ripczynski was born in Lodz, Poland. As he entered the film world, his main interest was in cinematography and worked as a cinematographer in his early career before being hired by various studios to direct short films, both in Poland as well as Austria. But the time is the early 1980s, and in Poland, the regime is cracking down on insubordination, in particular Solidarity, which is the primary workers' union in Poland, and fostering anti-authoritarian thought into the populace. And Ripczynski just happened to be a significant member of said union. So, as the martial law was declared in Poland, Ripczynski found a way out of there, garnering political asylum in Austria before immigrating to the United States. And wouldn't you know it, right as Big started trying to kickstart an American career in the film industry, he wins an Oscar for one of his short films he made in Poland. And suddenly things are looking up for him. He's getting commissioned for He's getting commissioned, he forms his own studios, big vision, and all the while he's pushing the technological envelope, experimenting with new technology and techniques, including in-camera editing, eliminating the need for post-production, analog split screen, HD TV technology, motion control technology that can move the camera and scene elements in sync with each other, and so much more. And he also made a whole bunch of music videos working with artists like Mick Jagger, Herb Albert, Yoko Ono, I Am Siam, Art of Noise, and Pet Shop Boys. That's a good overview of his career, so let's mention a few fun facts. First, he currently lives in Tucson, Arizona, which is where I live. I dream of getting the chance to invite him on the podcast, but if that's going to happen, I'm going to wait until after this section of the podcast and when we go to more general categories. Second, in 2009, he returned to Poland and made the Center for Audiovisual Technologies, but he would end up being fired from the center after discovering and publicly revealing corruption and embezzlement by higher ups at the center, and afterwards renouncing his Polish citizenship. Third, the third thing I will say for after we talk about Tango, because it involves his Oscar night, and I'm certain Christof and I are going to get into a long discussion about how amazing and insane it all is. So let's first go back to the 1980s, as Zbigniew Rybczynski made a little film called Tango, which is set entirely within the small living area of a house. A ball flies in through the window, and a young boy jumps through as well to retrieve it. He leaves with the ball, but as soon as it ends, the ball comes back in, starting the loop again. After a few repeats, a second character appears from the back door, a woman who nurses the baby at a table, then leaves through the right door, only to appear again from the back door. The cycle repeats, introducing more and more characters, each with their own loops, slowly just overwhelming you with just how much is happening in such a small space. So much chaos, yet somehow so intricately choreographed, like perhaps a tango. Christof, what did you think of our winner?
This is such an amazing short film. If you just begin to watch it, it begins to overwhelm you at some point. Initially, you see, okay, there's this boy coming in through the window and he's getting out again. Then there's a woman with a baby and she's leaving and she's suddenly back. And then there's this man in sunglasses who stealthily enters through the window and takes away a packet from the top of a wardrobe. And another man comes in and puts the packet back on the wardrobe. And as this beginning of thinking, okay, there will be one more character with every loop, but it gets very crowded very soon, and these cycles are overlapping. They are beginning. Sometimes the next cycle begins before the previous one has finished. At some later point, these cycles are beginning very soon after one another. Sometimes only a few seconds into one cycle, the next character is suddenly appearing, and when you watch this for the first time, there's a point when you give up, and then to give up trying to figure out what is new and what is happening next. You just begin to take it all in, and suddenly there's a naked woman in the foreground putting on panties, and a cleaning lady is mopping the ceiling. A couple is lying on the bed and making out with each other. It's just so many things, and there are certain sounds that you keep getting more and more prominent. You keep hearing doors opening and going shut. There's a man who's falling off the table and with a loud, shrieking, piercing scream every time. There's so much, and it's just an overwhelming experience. And the interesting thing is, although it's getting more and more crowded, the very simple melody, probably a tango bass melody, the film is called Tango, doesn't change throughout. It's just the same rhythm. It doesn't get faster as you might expect because it's getting more and more crowded and they are overlapping more and more. It's the very same melody throughout, giving it a rhythm. And these characters are really all in the room together. I'm not quite sure, but probably never in the same place at the same time, even as their cycles are together. I tried to have a look, but of course there are too many to really keep an eye out for. And I know after watching for the first time, I was incredibly impressed. And this was made in 1982. If this was made with today's technology, it would probably look a lot better and a lot cleaner. But there is a certain charm to the earlier technology with this it's made, where you can see sometimes how it's not perfect and not going through it. There's a charm to it that maybe a better perfection wouldn't have. And I really, so many. It gets of more and more and more, and then as it ends, suddenly all characters are leaving the room and all the cycles end, and you just see the last few remaining characters in the room, and the last person you see leaving the room is an elderly woman who is, as far as I can tell, the last person, the last cycle who's there. The second to last person leaving the room is a little boy who's beginning it all. It's quite an experience to see this, and it leaves quite an impression on me.
Yes, it's a film that like really rewards like multiple watches because like with each watch you can like either like focus on each of the individual characters and their different loops, like just try to point out like all the different characters there are. Like you did just recently, you made a whole letterbox review detailing every single character that is in this film, or at least to your knowledge. You made
Every single character that I spotted. This morning, I spent more than an hour watching it, rewinding it, and trying to get all the cycles together. I counted 21 cycles with, I believe, 25 people and one dog. Uh, who
I
are,
love the dog. How the
yeah.
owner spanks the dog.
Although I'm fairly certain, I rewatched it again just before recording this episode. I'm fairly certain it's not quite right what I'm writing about the dog. I believe that the man and the dog are in the room for a few seconds before he gets onto the bed, and I don't think they enter from the right side. But as I said, I tried this morning to get some sort of order, and I came to 21 cycles, 21 little stories happening at the same time. Some are fairly inconspicuous, like a woman coming into the room and cutting some meat and then leaving the room. Others are a lot more drawing attention to themselves. I mean, I remember, I think the first time I watched it, the man who is screwing in or changing a light bulb and falling off the table and screaming as he does so draws attention to himself through his scream, and the scream is repeating itself again and again and again, and you see him climb on the chair, and you know it's going to happen again, and he's falling down again, and just before he's changing the light bulb, another man is doing a handstand on the chair right next to him. It's these character interactions. Sometimes these characters interact with another through their loops. There's one man who is putting a vase of flowers on the table, and another character who's taking the vase away every time she's doing her cycle. So some of these characters are actually interacting with each other in their loops, even although they don't enter at the same time. So every time, so if you rewatch this, if you pay even closer attention to it, rewind it. I spent 1 hour, more than 1 hour with this short this morning, and I'm fairly certain I did not get everything. I did not spot everything. There might even be another character or another loop that I just missed throughout, because there's one very prominent loop that I only spotted towards the end because the cleaning lady is one of the last persons in the room, and I completely missed her every single time before that, despite the times I rewound it. So it's really crowded, and it's really interesting to watch this. I'm really fascinated by this.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about how like despite like all the different characters in the room, like they are never in like the same place at the same time. And that's what I was really drawn to when I was watching it this time. It's just like I kept wanting looking out at the different chairs and just trying to see a point. I mean, when like one character is in the chair at the same time as another character, trying to spot like that little that little misstep or something like that. But it never came. It's just so it really just points out just how intricate this all seems, even though it is so chaotic, like especially at its peak. It's just it is so intricately choreographed, like I said, and it's just like it just gives me a lot more appreciation for Rybczynski. As did rewatch or not rewatching, but watching for the first time a lot of his other films, a lot of which do touch upon like the same kind of thing, especially his film A New Book, which features like 9 different frames of a scene, I guess, a part of each showing a different part of the city, and like you see characters go from one frame to the next, and it's just like it's the same kind of thing where it's just like suddenly more and more characters are building up in the different scenes, and then there's this moment with like this big bang or earthquake or something like that, and from then on the characters start disappearing thing, and it gives me a very similar reaction, and it's just like, and it's also a thing where it's like you can even loop the whole film. Oh, and it's just like this is something that uh it this kind of intense choreography is something that Zbigniew Rybczynski really likes to do. Who and it's just like, and that's the main thing I took away from like researching him for this. It's just like he's a man who really likes pre-production and really likes to really rehearse and choreograph his films, but he really hates post-production and desperately tries to get everything done like on the day of filming in camera, and like inventing new ways just so he doesn't have to deal with post-production, which I don't know why he hates it, but he apparently does. Maybe it's just being so tired by having to edit all these different scenes together. Who knows? But yeah, this is a film that is very easy, like not easy to appreciate, but I find myself really appreciating it, even though I was like a bit too overwhelmed by it to the point where it's just like I found myself kind of like zoning out, where it's just like okay, this is just too much to process. But I feel like if I did put in the time to like really like watch this film again and again, I would just find myself loving it more and more.
Maybe we should mention it's also quite funny at times. I mean, some of those loops, like the man with the dog who's spanking the dog as he's getting onto the bed and leaving, or another loop is just a guy entering the room and carrying a toilet bowl and a huge pipe. So it's just absurd. The absurdity of it is what makes it funny. As you said, these characters are never at the same place in the same time, at least as far as I can tell. Sometimes they are fairly close. I mean, the boy who's climbing into the window and the man who is also walking in the window to grab the packet that's on the wardrobe, they're fairly close to each other. And you might see they probably would bump into each other as they do.
Even then, I noticed that like they're never like on the window at the same time. It's like
Yes.
the man goes first and then the boy does.
And I think only with one of the characters, and it's an older man who enters fairly late, only one of the characters I had the appearance while observing him in particular that he is actually evading the other characters. It's a man with a newspaper who, it seems to me, is just avoiding bumping into other people, whereas everyone else just sometimes ever so closely misses everyone else. The elderly lady who's lying down on the bed lies down in exactly the same moment that the dog gets shooed away from the bed. So sometimes there are very close calls and very near misses, and it's all, I find it interesting. It's the great thing about the short, as I said, I spent 1 hour today, and you can rewind, you can watch at a particular place in this one room where this is happening, and just see how at this particular part of the frame, in this particular part of the room, characters are just merely passing each other by, seemingly without being aware of their existence. I am fairly certain that the young couple who's having sex in the foreground isn't aware of the other people in the room. At least I hope so. It would be rather weird if they did it anyway. So it's just so many things to look at, so many things to take in. It's endlessly fascinating. Watching it today was not a call to get the list of these 21. It was just I just wanted to soak it all inside me. That's why I was doing it.
Yeah, it is just totally overwhelming. It's like even when you like try to sit down and like really pay attention, like you just did, it's just like it's still just a mind-boggling experience. And it's just like I was reading like other people's take on it, and I like the idea that like these are all people who are like living together, or like either they're roommates or like they're all a big family or something like that. And it's just like they all are just have to live in this little house because, maybe they're like all working class or just don't make that much money and want to like, share the cost of rent. And it's just like, and that adds to a lot of it to me because it's like all these people are just living their own lives, but they're forced to live with all these other people who each have their own lives. And it's like they don't really want to, maybe they don't want to consider it, or it's just like they're just so invested in their own lives that they just don't think to. But it's just like we're all just within our own little worlds. We're all so lonely despite the fact that there's so many people around us. Yeah. that awkward silence.
Yeah, that awkward silence is just another sign of how overwhelmed I am by this short. So, are we moving on to Oscar night and
Yeah.
what happened?
Just speaking of being overwhelmed, and speaking of, I don't know how to transition to this, but I would like to talk about the 55th Academy Awards, or as I like to call it, Zbig's Big Night, held on April 11th, 1983. So imagine, Liza Minnelli introduces two presenters, Matt Dillon and Christy McNichol. Dillon in a standard tuxedo, McNichol in a quite nice all-white tuxedo. They're here to present the awards for Best Short Film, Live Action, and Animated. After a quick joke and a half-hearted laugh, we dive straight into the nominees for Best Animated Short. Things start well, perhaps a bit awkward, as Christy McNichol struggles to say Zubigniew Rybczynski, something. Not the worst attempt of an American pronouncing a Polish name, but we still move on. Matt Dillon hands Christy the envelope, and unfortunately for her, she has to say the Polish name again, and absolutely butchers it this time. Tango, Jibnewski, Sky. But Zbigniew Rybczynski saunters up to the stage with his translator in tow, and we settle in for the speech. Zbigniew starts talking and pauses for its translator, only to interrupt her as she begins translating, and this happens repeatedly throughout the speech. Distinguished members of the Academy, ladies and gentlemen, I made a short film, so I will speak very short. This gets a laugh, a promising start, though it took us 30 seconds to get to this point in the speech. I feel honored to receive this award. I am dreaming that someday I will speak longer from this place. What a lovely speech. They begin to play off Rybczynski, but despite Dillon and McNichol trying to escort them off, they stay put. It's not over yet. He has an important message, his translator says, followed by Zbig giving Christy McNichol a kiss on the cheek. He then continues his speech, and on the occasion of a film like Gandhi, which will portray Lech Walesa in solidarity. I'm not sure if the translator messed up there or if Zbig's original statement just didn't make any sense, but I believe he was trying to say that he wants to make a film similar to Gandhi, which was the Best Picture winner that year, but about Lech Walesa, the commissioner of the Solidarity Union in Poland, which I mentioned earlier. In any case, this final remark finally gets them off the stage, with Dillon McNichol moving on to present live action short to A Shocking Accident. After a stop in the press room, Rybczynski then steps outside for a moment to smoke a cigarette. However, upon attempting to go back inside, one or two security guards, depending on which version you read, prevent his re-entry. The confrontation escalates to the point where allegedly Rybczynski shouted at the guard, "American pig, I have Oscar," and kicked them in the balls. The police were called, and Rybczynski and his Oscar made their way to jail. A spokesman for the guards said they weren't injured, just in a lot of pain. And reflecting on the incident later, Rybczynski said, "Success and defeat are quite intertwined." This is perhaps one of my favorite stories from the Oscars, and I know it's one of yours too, Christof.
It's such an amazing Oscar story, and just the ups and downs that Zbigniew Rybczynski had on this within just a few minutes. It's just amazing, and I think first of all we need to talk about the etiquette of being an Oscar presenter, because Christy McNichol and Matt Dillon really if you're a presenter at an award show, you literally have one job, and that one job is reading out names. And it's not just any names, it's names of people who are sitting in front of you and who are excited to hear you say their names. And the way these two butchered the names, not just Zbigniew Rybczynski, because also if people will watch the clip and just And when Zbigniew Rybczynski gets escorted, finally leaves the stage, we'll be wondering why I'm including Matt Dillon in this at all, because Matt Dillon in the first half of the presentation gets to read all the easy American names. If you are an awards presenter, the one thing you should do is look at the names you have to read out. If those names are Kate Blanchett, Nicole Kidman, Emma Stone, Meryl Streep, perfect. No notes. You know these names. You have heard them often before. You have said them often before. You can do it without accident. If these are names you never heard before, you might want to try to say them, especially if they are from other countries than you are, and you might have trouble pronouncing them. If you're not sure how to pronounce them, ask someone. It's very clear that neither Christy McNichol nor Matt Dillon ever read the names of the people they were reading out here. They read it the first time when they saw the names on the teleprompter and later in the envelope. And it's quite interesting because in the second half of the clip, Matt Dillon gets the foreign names to read out, and he's screwing up just as badly as Christy McNichol. And the difference is that Christy McNichol at least seems embarrassed that she doesn't know how to pronounce it. The first time goes with Zbigniew Rybczynski Sky something, and then with completely defeated Chepniewski Sky, she seems embarrassed. Matt Dillon just doesn't care. I believe he's stoned, and if he isn't, Matt Dillon, please sue me. But I believe Matt Dillon is stoned as he's standing there. He just doesn't care. He doesn't care about the names he's pronouncing. He doesn't care what impression this makes on the nominee, who's probably in the audience as well. Is very excited to hear his name read out. And Matt Dillon is just couldn't be bothered with doing his job properly. If you are a fucking presenter at an award show, learn to pronounce the names. If you are screwing it up regardless, at least apologize for it. At least say sorry. That's the least thing you can do. Don't be Christy McNichol and Matt Dillon. Don't. Just don't.
I'm reminded of like earlier this year when the nominees were announced for this year's Academy Awards, and like people on Twitter were like giving Allison Williams like a lot of praise because she pronounced the foreign names correctly. Yeah, and it's just like, wow, she did her job. It's just like yeah, she met the basic standard for what she was hired to do, which is saying the names correctly. Yeah, and it's just like, and yes, many
and we
of them
don't know
were,
how much time she had to prepare. I mean, she certainly didn't have as much time to prepare as Christy McNichol and Matt Dillon had, because they knew very well in advance who the nominees are going to be.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's like we've come a long way from 1983, and it's just like, so moving on from the two presenters to the speech itself. This is one of the most awkward acceptance speeches there is. Like up there with what was it? The documentary short presentation where like one of the winners was just like talking over the other. It's like they clearly did not get along at all. It was a Songs with Prudence or something like that.
Yeah, I remember that. That was very weird when the two people don't really seem to like each other.
Yeah. But yeah, this speech, which is Zbigniew Rybczynski awkwardly standing there, probably also under the influence, probably drunk or something, and just trying to come up with anything to say. And his poor translator, I feel bad for her in all of this. Like I'm not sure like if she knew Rybczynski beforehand or if she was like hired by the Academy to translate for him in case he won. But it's just like she seems a little bit like this is not a good day of her job.
Yeah. Also, you say Christy McNichol and Matt Dillon try to escort him off the stage. It almost looks like they're trying to shoving him away from the microphone, at least at one point. And then he's hugging them or something like that, and the interpreter feels forced to say that this is a Slavic custom or way to show. I don't know exactly what word she used, but she seems
this is Slavic custom.
This is Slavic. She seems clearly embarrassed at his behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he he gives Kristen McNichol a kiss on the cheek, and she does seem clearly uncomfortable in the brief moment we see her in the clip after the event, and it's just like this is just. I just feel bad for everyone in this scenario. Like even Matt Dillon and Kristen McNichol, like they didn't expect to have to deal with a Polish weirdo that day.
That's right, but still, they should have learned his name.
They should have learned his name, yes. Learn the name of the Polish weirdo. But yeah, this speech does last forever. And you pointed out to me, like in the lead up to us recording this, about Jack Lemmon at near the end of Rybczynski's speech, how he's saying something to the person next to him, and we're both trying to read his lips, and it seems like he's saying like great, 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 or really, really good, or one of my interpretations was grading, 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 though he seems a bit happier than that would
Yeah,
imply.
he seems a lot happier than Paul Newman or Dustin Hoffman, who we're both seeing as well. Jack Lemmon is enjoying this. Paul Newman is not enjoying this, and Dustin Hoffman is glad it's over.
Were all of them nominated that year? I'm trying to remember. Like, were they Best Actor nominees that they just kept the cameras near?
Lemmon was not a Best Actor nominee. Lemmon was last nominated in 1980. But Dustin Hoffman and Paul Newman were both nominated for Tootsie and The Verdict.
Okay.
And Lemmon was in Missing that year, but I don't think he was nominated for it.
Oh, okay, but yeah,
Missing was, I think,
nominee.
Best Picture nominee. Yeah.
But yeah, this is and after the speech, we of course. But what do we make of this altercation with the security guard? And I just want to say that like while the more the one famous version of the story, I guess, as does say that he brought the Oscar outside with him, and the guards still wouldn't let him inside. In a news article from the time that I found, it's like Rybczynski specifically says that he left the Oscar or like inside or somewhere else specifically because he didn't want to bring it into the bathroom with him, which I guess is where he first started smoking before, going outside or something.
Yeah, I mean, it makes for a better anecdote if he's holding the Oscar in hand as he's saying, American peak, I have Oscar. It makes for a more believable story if he doesn't have the Oscar in his hand and it's just a drunk Polish guy ranting outside and demanding to go back to the Oscars. So I think if I'm playing the scene in front of me, deep down I believe that the Oscar wasn't with him, but if I was making a movie version of this event, he would definitely hold the Oscar in hand and shove it right into the security guard's face as he's kicking his nuts.
I'm imagining the movie now. I feel like this needs to be an Oscar-nominated short film.
Yes, yes.
I was big Rybczynski.
Even an animated short film.
Even animated. Although that does bring me to a point I forgot to bring up earlier. How is Tango animated? Because from what I could tell, it is like entirely live action scenes, and it is like it's not like pixelation or something like that where it becomes essentially stop motion. It's just film scenes of different actors, and they're each on like a green screen or blue screen and inserted into a scene. It's just like it, which it's definitely on the border between animation and live action.
I think that's an interesting question. It's definitely using computer special effects to work. So it's if it was made today, we wouldn't really consider it animated because it's still the early days of using computers for animation, especially in this way, and it also looks a bit rough. It certainly looks rougher than we're used to from live action shorts. It's not something that happens in the editing room because there definitely is a computer involved to make it flow the way it flows at the end. I think I have no complaints about putting it in the animated short category. The Academy, at least, certainly had way worse miscategorizations in the short categories in its past.
Yes, the famous like
The
doc
Shell commercial that won an Oscar for best documentary short.
yeah, how live action short has more documentaries in it than documentary short does at points.
Yeah.
It's yeah, but yeah, I wouldn't call this like egregious or anything. And it's just like I guess I'm more of the modern mind, I guess, where in the world where it's just like a lot of our big live action movies today are just as people on green screens with a bunch of computer graphics painted onto them. So
It
it's just like
certainly it certainly wouldn't fit into live action because live action is really more about with the other nominees in live action, which are usually about stories being told, and this is more a conceptual thing, a conceptual short film, which is not telling a story, but merely showing something that is, let's say, open to interpretation.
though part of me wishes it was live action so we could have Tango winning instead of a shocking accident, and then maybe we get something, and then have like the Snowman or even Great Cognito win instead. Though we'll get to whether either of those films would be worthy of the Oscar later on, or maybe
Yeah.
soon. Or would you like to move on to the other nominees now, or do you have something else you'd like to add to our conversation about Tango and the 55th Academy Awards?
I think I have nothing to add. I just want to say again, Christy McNichol, Matt Dillon, you can do better than this.
I wonder how they think back on this incident. Like,
Oh,
do
I hope they are embarrassed.
I don't think Matt Dillon remembers it at all. I
Yes, yes. You want to be sued as well, don't you?
I hope part of me wants to just say something just to ensure that he sues us for this episode. Uh, I don't know. I was going to mention Crash in some way, but I can't think of a funny way to do it. But Christy McNichol, I'm thinking that she does remember this and she does view it as like an embarrassing moment in her life. Though I doubt she remembers the names Zbigniew Rybczynski at all.
Yeah, or not even Chepniewski Sky.
Yes. Uh, I I wonder if they even found out about like what his following minutes were like, or if they just kind of went on and then went off stage and drove back
I
home or whatever.
I could perfectly picture someone the next day saying to Chris McNichol, "Remember that awkward Polish guy who was kissing you on the cheek? He was arrested a few minutes later."
Uh, this is such a fantastic story. I'm
From every angle, from every angle.
Yeah, I hope the listeners out there are grateful we told it to them, and they should be.
Yes.
But yeah, I just
And
want
you
to.
should watch Tango, and you should probably also watch Zbigniew Rybczynski receiving the Oscar and creating this very awkward moment together with Christy McNichol and Matt Dillon.
It's honestly a great short film in itself.
Yeah, it is. Maybe even a better short film than the one we're going to talk about next.
Uh, but yeah, I just want to end this section repeating Rybczynski's nostalgic comments of the night. Success and defeat are quite intertwined, which is a beautiful line. Um, And so our second nominee is The Great Cognito, directed by Will Vinton. This is his fourth and final Oscar nomination, ending his run with one win, that being for his first nomination, Close Mondays. But oh boy, when Hollywood closes a door, it opens a window. First off, technically, Will Vinton gets one more Oscar nomination after this, as he was nominated for Best Visual Effects for his work on Return to Oz. But what shall we say is his biggest accomplishment after his animated short run? Is it the creation of his first feature film, The Adventures of Mark Twain, which I am personally a big fan of? Or perhaps it's his work with Michael Jackson on both Captain EO and the film Moonwalker, which I have not seen. Though I do also love Captain EO as the thing. It's a fantastic short film. I wish it was eligible for the Oscars. Or how about his 3 claymation holiday specials on CBS? No, his most famous work, I think, is that of his advertising. He created Domino's The Noid, the anthropomorphized M&Ms, and of course, the California Raisins. It started with a commercial for raisins by Sunmaid and the California Raisin Advisory Board, desperate for people to buy some goddamn raisins. They threw out the idea of just some raisins singing "I Heard It Through the Grapevine." They made that commercial and it became popular. The campaign lasted 8 years and the Raisins got 4 studio albums, 2 TV specials, a Saturday morning cartoon, an NES game, endless merchandise, and a fucking Emmy. They had to stop the campaign because it cost them twice the amount they were actually making. And so they shut down the advisory board, replacing it later with the marketing board, which was instead funded by the raisin growers rather than the state. But now we come to the downfall of Will Vinton. First, Vinton started moving away from claymation, instead focusing his efforts on using foam models instead, which Vinton called foammation and isn't nearly as catchy as claymation. Second, Vinton made 2 TV shows that both flopped. The Eddie Murphy produced The PJs and the UPN series Gary and Mike. Third, Will Vinton was desperate to make another feature film and begun bringing in outside investors to raise up the funds. The key player here is Nike founder Phil Knight, also known as the guy Ben Affleck played in the movie Air, who got in via his son Travis, who used to animate at Vinton Studios. But Will Vinton's funding started to dry up, eventually leading to Phil Knight becoming the majority stockholder at the studio. Vinton ended up being ousted from the company that bore his name. He filed a lawsuit about it, and so the studio ended up changing its name to Leica. Yes, Leica Studios has its origins in the California fucking raisins. And the rest is history. Leica brings on Henry Selick as supervising director, and they begin production on Coraline. Vinton, meanwhile, tried multiple other ventures in his final years, but nothing really matched up to his prior success. And sadly, Will Vinton passed away on October 4th, 2018, due to multiple myeloma. And on this note, I want us to remember Bob Gardner. For those who don't remember, he was the co-director on Close Mondays. Will Vinton and Bob Gardner developed claymation together, and both of them saying that Gardner developed many of the key techniques that gave Will Vinton's later films their unique style and charm. Yet Bob Gardner, after he and Vinton had a falling out and went their separate ways, never saw a cent of Will Vinton's success and couldn't make his own success from his many artistic ventures. Gardner lived his life resenting Vinton, thinking about how he could have or how successful he could have or should have been, and ending with his suicide in 2005. I think it's interesting how Will Vinton at that same time was finally in Gardner's shoes, being bitter and resentful about someone taking his dream. In his case, it was Phil Knight taking his production company. Are either of them right to be bitter and resentful? I can't say. I don't know them, nor is it my place to pass judgment like that. But to me, it's just a fascinating mirror. And anyway, a long time ago, we were talking about the 55th Academy Awards and mentioned the film The Great Cognito. It's about the titular Cognito, a fast-talking comedian at a dining hall doing impressions. However, it has his face morph into the different characters he impersonates. As the short goes on, the faster he seems to talk, and the more outlandish are his transformations. Christof, I've talked so much as is. What do you think of The Great Cognito?
Well, first of all, I have to say, even although I really love stop motion animation in general, and it's probably my favorite kind of animation, there's always something about let's say, Will Winton's look that I usually don't really love. There's always a bit on the ugly side, especially his characters. I don't really, even at his best, I can never really quite embrace what he's doing. And The Great Cognito isn't really his best, I would say. It's basically a guy doing a stand-up about World War II of all things. He begins by talking about our leaders and begins with Hitler next, and it's very, very fast. He's talking so fast, and I believe it's supposed to be funny. At least we're hearing people laugh at what he's saying. I did not get a single really funny moment in what he's saying. The monologue the monologue isn't funny. Maybe it's the wrong topic. It's kind of weird doing a stand-up about World War II with Patton and Churchill and Roosevelt all popping up and tanks and I don't know. It's moving on so rapidly from non-joke to non-joke, while he's transforming all the same. And as this rapid fire monologue is setting the pace, there's barely any time to really appreciate all the transformation his character is having in its claymation form. This is just 4 minutes of short film, and there's quite a few things are happening visually. I think the biggest mistake of this film is putting the monologue at the center and making the animation almost an afterthought, although the animation is clearly what took a lot more effort to create. And there are a few brief moments that I really like a brief moment when he is turning into the Andrews sisters, but it's, I don't know, half a second maybe, and it's gone already. You can't really take it in because everything that happens that is good is gone again so quickly. There's also at some point an entire torso is coming out of what used to be his neck. There's also there's also a brief racist depiction of Japanese in claymation form, which gave me flashbacks of the propaganda shorts we were talking about in the 1941 episode. So it's just it has its priorities wrong. It puts its worst aspect, which is the monologue, at center and lets this monologue set the pace, and the animation, which should be the main thing, is just added on it. And the animation, it is good, and I say this as someone who, as I said, often doesn't really appreciate Will Wheaton's style of animation, but it's just gone so quickly that I wished it had a bit more time, and maybe throw out half the jokes, actually make them funny, actually add punchlines, and this would at least work. The way that it is, it's just doing nothing for me.
I agree with a lot of your points, although I feel like I enjoyed it a little bit more than you did. It's just like there is the two parts of the short. There is the comedian and his monologue and his impressions, and then there is the animation. And the monologue and the impressions do absolutely nothing for me. They are just so unimportant to like why I'm watching the short. Like I almost kind of tune it out. Although it just it just isn't funny and it doesn't make a lot of sense. He is just so rapidly going from one point to the next that you can't even really follow it. And it's just this, where am I supposed to be laughing at this? Is like, and the fact that it ends with the guy doing a John Wayne impression and then crying about how John Wayne got shot in the movie and he's just too sad to continue the bit. It's just like what an anticlimactic ending for the short. And it makes it even more depressing because I really love this animation. I love how fast the animation goes. I love the kinetic energy it has. It's just like so rapidly morphing into all the different faces. And it's like it starts out just going to like, oh, here's Adolf Hitler, here's General Patton, here's General MacArthur, and then it's just like, but then different ways that they interpret like what his face can do, and it's just like the like you said, the grotesque image of the Andrews sisters, and then how his face like literally turns into like a sea with a periscope poking out of it and things like that. It's really inventive, the way, and it's just like it does like what I think claymation is best used for, which is just grotesquely morphing from one thing to the next and just being able to see it change into this amorphous blob at points. It's just like that is just so cool and can make for some really like really cool gross stuff to make. It's just like and so I really love the animation, but it's just like it could have been used for a much funnier and much more interesting base, I guess. And it's just like, and like you said that like, oh, they spent so much time on the animation, or no, you said they spent so much on the monologue, but like didn't care that much about the animation. It's like really they just wanted to an excuse to do all this animation here and just kind of whipped up this half-assed monologue. And it's just like they should have focused more on the writing and try to make something worth animating. And it's just like, but they didn't. And it's like, in the end, I do enjoy it. I do like it just because at the end of the day, I can just stop listening to whatever he's saying and just enjoy the pretty visuals in front of me. As it's like, that's good enough. But it should be better than good enough.
We should really have more time to take in what happens because it's just happening so fast. It's over in 4 minutes. There's no real sense of development there. It's just quickly done and then it's over, and it just feels like a waste of great visual ideas.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't think the runtime is the problem. That's where we disagree. Just think it's just like you can we have a lot of great films that are in this category even that are just very short things. It's just like I think you are a fan of like the shortest nominee, which is the film by Pets. What's it called? Fresh Guacamole.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah. And so it's just like I think it should have just used its time better. And I imagine it's like part of the reason why it is so short is because, stop motion is a very cost heavy, labor intensive medium. And so it's just like it is hard to make a film even that long. So it's just like they like I said, they really should have put more effort into like the comedian's monologue or maybe just making a different setting. I think this film is really comparable to a later nominee in this decade, a film that won, Your Face, which is similarly it's a similar film about like a guy's face morphing around and going to different things. And it's just like I think that film does the similar concept in a better way in the fact that it has less of a plot. It has less of a setting. It is literally just a guy's face morphing as he's singing. And it's just like it works because it doesn't have the setup of this this fucking guy. It's just like I don't need to know who this fucking guy is. I don't need him to say anything. I just want to see the face morph.
Yeah, Your Face is so much better than The Great Cognito.
It is. It really is. Yeah. Everybody watch Your Face.
Yeah,
And then listen to the episode coming out in a few weeks. It's about it and other nominees that year. Anything else to say about the Great Cognito? Anything you want to
nothing
say
at
about
all.
anything you want
Nothing
to
at
say
all.
about the California raisins while we're here?
I'm not familiar with the California raisins, I'm afraid. It's probably an American thing, isn't it?
Yes, it very much is. Though I thought you might just have encountered it through cultural osmosis, just by being online or been being around in the 80s, being
No,
familiar with
somehow
American media.
California raisins haven't crossed over to me.
Okay. Well, then we'll just move on to our third and final nominee, which is The Snowman, directed by Diane Jackson and Jimmy T. Murakami. This is the first and only nomination for Jackson, as well as producer John Coates, who was the animation producer of Channel 4, making this Channel 4's first nomination as well, because they do get other noms. Unfortunately for us, though, there is not much to say in regards to either of these people, at least of what I can find. Both of our nominees this year actually began their careers working on Yellow Submarine, albeit in much different departments. Coates as a production supervisor, Jackson as an animator. And after this film, the two also worked on the Jimmy Murakami film Where the Wind Blows, also based on a book by Raymond Briggs. But it's a short list of credits for Jackson, partially because animator work often does go uncredited, so it's hard to figure out what films she worked on before this, but also because Jackson passed away from cancer on December 31st, 1992, at the age of 51. As for Coates, while he does have a longer career, there isn't much I can even find on him as a person. Just a list of credits, and he passed away in 2012, while a sequel to today's short film was wrapping up production at the age of 85. May they both rest in peace. But despite a short list of credits, if your lasting legacy is The Snowman, you can't go wrong. Based on Raymond Briggs' 1978 picture book and the original broadcast beginning with an intro by Briggs, The Snowman wordlessly tells the story of a boy who builds a snowman only for it to come to life. First, the boy invites the snowman inside his house and they play around, even stealing a motorcycle at one point and going for a joyride. But eventually, the snowman takes flight, bringing the boy with him, flying over land and sea, eventually reaching the North Pole. The boy meets Father Christmas, which is in fact a crossover with another Raymond Briggs book, and a bunch of snowmen have a party together. Uh, this film has aired every single Christmas in the UK since its first premiered, and has even and when it was brought to the US, they changed the intro to David Bowie for some reason. Just wanted to throw that fact out there. But Christoph, what did you think of our final nominee, The Snowman?
Well, the Snowman is this year's resident, the boy, the fox, the groundhog, the donkey, and the iguana short, in the way that it's an adaptation of a children's book aimed at children and also clearly made for a 30-minute TV spot. And it looks gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous to look at. It's animated in the style of children's books animation. I can only imagine that it probably translates the animation of the original children's book to the screen. It looks just wonderful. Every single frame looks absolutely beautiful. And it also does something which I truly love and admire, especially in an animated short. It tells its tale entirely without words. There's no dialogue. There is no voiceover. There are no intertitles. It just tells its entire story. Now, of course, it's not the most complicated of stories, but it tells its entire story without a single word being said at any moment. It's a bit sentimental. There's wonderful music. There's a very, very beautiful song that was written for it, and it should have been eligible for the Best Original Song Oscar, and it should have been nominated. Just saying that here. It's also, the song became a Christmas classic, at least in the UK, as far as I can tell as well, simply by the fact that it was written for this very famous Christmas classic film, Walking on Air. It's only Walking in the Air, I believe it's
Walking
called.
in the Air.
It's such a beautiful, serene song, sung by a young child. I really like it a lot. The one thing I want to say is, A, it's a bit sentimental, but it does sentimental quite good. B, I think you can tell that it was made for this 30-minute TV slot, in the way that at times it feels there's a bit padding and a bit moments where you think we could move ahead a bit quicker, but you had the 25 minutes to fill, so you could do it in your 30-minute TV slot. It probably could have been a bit shorter. There's a certain necessity that led to it being maybe longer than it should have been, but I don't really want to complain all that much, because overall it's just a very, very beautiful sentimental Christmas classic.
I totally agree with everything you said. This is a film that I have, one, known about, and two, watched multiple times in my life. I think I first saw it in like high school or something, maybe younger, and it's just something that's always stuck with me. I've seen it multiple times. It always is just such a beautiful film, this beautiful experience just to sit there and take it all in. And I love the illustrations. I love the way, hey, everything moves. It's just like, I love, the snowman is so beautifully designed. He's such perfect, even though like nobody would make a fucking snowman that way, where it's just a pile of snow and then you put the hat on top, the head on top, and it's just like, and you built like arms down the side and legs for it, like of that pile of snow. It's a weird snowman for a child to make, but it works. And it's like I also do agree about how it does really feel like it's padding, because even though and like when they're just wandering around the house doing funny things, it's just like, while I am totally charmed during those scenes, there are times when it's like, okay, I know where this is going. I know we're going to get to the flying in the air part. And it's just like, I kind of want to move on to that, but we're still stuck here in this house. And it's just like, there can't be that much to do here. And
Yeah, I mean, those parents are sleeping like logs. They are in their bedroom, putting clothes on the snowman, putting makeup on the snowman, taking it off again, all with the lights on, and the parents are just sleeping the entire time, not noticing anything.
exactly. Although that is one of my favorite parts of it. I posted the picture on Twitter, but I love like when the snowman puts on blush and like looks at himself in the mirror. It's just really cute. And I also really love when they're by the Christmas tree and they look at the ornaments, and it's just like, see it, like the
The-
ornaments like
These
morph
are
their face a
amazing.
bit.
These are amazing moments. These amazing animated moments, like they're looking at themselves in the Christmas baubles. It looks great,
It's so cute. And like when they go to the kitchen and the snowman like swaps his nose for different fruits or whatever. First of all,
including a
it's
pineapple.
yes, the pineapple. Yeah, it's like, you see what we're talking about. Is this is like this movie is just so charming, even if it does go for a little long. And of course, like you were saying, the walking in the air sequence as they're flying over the countryside and over the ocean to get to the North Pole, it is truly one of the most beautiful scenes. It's like it is one of my most iconic scenes in terms of like Christmas cinema, maybe even just broadening it to like animation or cinema in general. It is just such a perfect moment that so perfectly encapsulates like what this film's about, like both in terms of just like I guess the whimsy or wonder of the whole thing, while also just having a tinge of melancholy in it, which you don't really find out what that melancholy is about until you get to the ending, which we'll talk about that when we get there. But it's it's such a beautiful song set to a beautiful piece of animation. I love it. I know how hard it is to make scenes like that where you have like the moving countryside and things like that. It's just like just constant motion, and it's incredibly hard to do. And it the work really shows here. It's just truly amazing. And you brought up it being nominated for uh that you should have been nominated for Best Original Song. And I went to look at the nominees here because I couldn't remember like what this original song category looked like. And oh my God, Walking in the Air is so much better than all of these. The
Yeah, I mean, it's better than Up Where We Belong, which won. It's probably better than Eye of the Tiger, which was also nominated. I could see. I mean, choosing between Eye of the Tiger and Walking in the Air, that's the hard one.
hmm And these other nominees are just a joke. It's like, how do you keep the music playing from Best Friends? If We Were in Love from Yes, Giorgio. It Might Be You from Tootsie. These certainly iconic songs that you definitely remember.
From
Wow.
great movies as Yes, Giorgio.
Yeah. God, it definitely should have won. I wouldn't. And the only time, just throwing an Oscar fact out there, the only time when a short film has been nominated for Best Original Song is Wet Blanket Policy, which was nominated for the Woody Woodpecker song. And I love the fact that that's an Oscar nominee. And it was also like in like the years when they finally switched to 5 nominees, which I wouldn't have expected, but it's a great thing. I just love that little tidbit. But we're getting off track. Snowman's great.
It
What do you
is.
what do you think of the North Pole sequence? It's like the snowman kidnaps a child and takes it to another continent.
That's the way of describing it. It it's it's beautiful to look at. It's probably at that point when I felt the film's length a bit. I think it's also, I read somewhere that this part was added for this adaptation, just to meet the 30-minute runtime or 25-minute runtime for the 30-minute spot. It's Well, I liked it. I wasn't absolutely wowed by it. It's just this beautiful sentimental thing throughout.
It really is. Even even though like that scene is clearly padding, it's just like you can't help but still be charmed by it. It's just like you don't care that it's padding. It's just so beautiful to behold. And I also want you started your discussion of it by mentioning the the unfortunate winner, the boy, the mole, the fox, the horse. And one, I just want to say that this film does the boy, the mole, the fox, and horse so much better, mainly because it has no dialogue, whereas the dialogue in that film is so grating. It makes you want to kill all those four title characters. And also, I wanted to mention, and when I told you while I was watching it before the episode, uh, I noticed during I think it's the motorcycle scene that
Mm.
both a fox and a horse show up very close together, and also considering the title boy, I was terrified that a mole might show up at any point. And I was just like, dear God, I hope that doesn't happen. But yeah,
But thank God there were owls who probably killed all moles.
yes. Um, but yeah, in terms of the British television specials based on books or children's stories, The Snowman is one of the best of the genre, while the Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse is one of the worst. Whereas it really is a dichotomy here. Anything else you'd like to say?
Uh, maybe a silly thing I spotted.
Go ahead.
There's
We love silly
once
things.
there's a scene in which we see the boy brushing his teeth before going to bed. And as he's brushing his teeth, you see in the background there's a glass with three toothbrushes in it. So which means that this family has a total of 4 toothbrushes they use. We got 2 parents and we got the boy who is using the 4th toothbrush. So my theory is the boy has an evil twin that is hiding in the attic, like Bart Simpson's evil twin Hugo in the Treehouse of Horror episode. Thoughts?
I I like that theory, but when you brought it up, my immediate thought was the cat, because there is a cat in this film. It's just like the cat gets its own toothbrush, but evil twin cat is just like either one is equally likely.
The cat doesn't like the snowman. That also should be noted.
But the cat hates the snow, and it was terrified by it.
Yeah,
As I imagine, like the parents probably would have been had they woken up during the snowman and the boy's loud adventures throughout the house.
yeah. But I think we will have to address the ending of the film now.
Before we get there, I just really like the fact that this family owns a motorcycle. Like this seemingly like just a normal, nice suburban family or whatever,
Yeah,
like owns a motorcycle. This is like, why would they own that? But I like that they do. But yeah,
agreed.
let's get to the ending of this film. Where it's like after the party at the North Pole, it's like the snowman and the boy fly back home. The snowman sits back into his position in the yard where he started out, and the boy gives him a hug. He waves from the door as he's head back to inside, goes to bed, and wakes up, and he's excited for a brand new day. He's just like he goes down, he races outside the house to see his friend the snowman, and he's melted. You see the hat and the scarf and his eyes and whatever in the snow. The boy just stands there looking down at it. And it's like he picks up his scarf from it. And it's just, and that's it. That's the ending. And as the credits roll, it's just like the credits start with the snowman was. And it's just like I know that it's meant to be the title, The Snowman, and was directed by Diane Jackson and on and on. But it's just like it just has The Snowman was at first. It's just like, oh my God, you're rubbing it in. You're you know we're sad, and you just want to twist the fucking knife.
It's really it's really it's definitely not intentional, but
It's definitely not
it
intentional.
I spot that as well. Because it's so unusual to begin your closing credits with title was, and then directed by, produced by, and so on. So it's an unusual way to present it. So maybe it even was a bit intentional by someone. But yeah, I spotted that as well. I have to say one thing about the ending though. Why did the snowman melt? The entire landscape, the snow is still there everywhere. Uh, the snowman should still be there. I mean, we've seen this snowman being in the house, standing next to an open fire, and only noticing after some time that maybe standing next to an open fire isn't the greatest thing to do when you're a snowman. Why has he melted? It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
So first, I think the implication is that the whole experience with the snowman was a dream. That's what's implied there. Uh, but also, in the
So you
opening
are
narration,
saying the film doesn't imply that snowman can actually fly, and if you're waking up after midnight and invite a snowman into your house, he will fly you to the North Pole where you'll meet Santa Claus.
I mean, only magic snowmen do that. Like you need like Frosty, like he had the magic hat, and so it's like he can do that. But the kid just built a regular snowman, no magic hat at all, so he can't do that.
Okay, I'm
But
gonna believe you
also,
that.
the Raymond Briggs narration that started the original version of it, um, it talks about how like this was like a particularly heavy snow or something like that, and so I'm thinking like the next day it didn't snow at all. Oh, and it probably did get a bit warmer, so it's just like it did melt some of the snow, but there was just so much snow that day that it didn't melt all of it. But of course, the big obelisk of snow. Oh, that was built is of course got a lot of the heat of the sun and so probably melted first. That's my
I
theory.
th- I think I'm willing to accept that. I mean, I'm also accepting that the snowman can fly to the North Pole, so why shouldn't I accept that he's mostly gone the next day?
And you accept the fact that the main kid has a twin brother in the attic.
Oh, yes, that's canon.
Evil twin brother.
Evil twin brothers separated at birth.
And that only comes out of the attic to brush his teeth.
Yes.
Which I mean it is nice of the parents to let him do that. I don't think Marge and Homer gave the same consideration to Hugo, but I guess they might be dentists. That's why they can afford this big house and afford that
Yeah.
motorcycle. Well, and so it's just like,
And they want even their evil son, evil twin in the attic to have good teeth.
though the maybe the evil twin got out of the attic, like when he went to brush his teeth, was able to find a way to sneak out and destroyed the snowman himself. Maybe got like a blowtorch or something, or one of the hot coals we saw and melted the snowman to spite
Yes.
his brother.
Yes, it all makes perfect sense now.
Yeah. Or the cat did it. Like whoever owns that fourth toothbrush melted the snowman. That's it. We've connected it.
Problem solved.
Wow. Who could have thought that this movie secretly holds evil twins and malicious intent?
So much to unpack.
So much. And, you know, isn't that what Christmas is all about?
Yes. Happy Christmas, dear listeners.
Happy Christmas from July. I think this comes out like July 18th or something like that. I'm probably a few days off, but late July. Oh wait, it's Frosty and Rudolph's Christmas in July. who out there listening even knows what that is? I don't even know what it is really. I just know the title and know that it's a Rankin Bass movie. Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I really want to because it seems awful. All right, I think unless you have something else to add, I think we're good to move on to our final sections.
I think we can go on to our rankings, yes.
All right, so we've talked about these three nominees. We are now going to rank them all. Christoph, start us off with your number three.
I mean, I have a very clear number one, very clear number two, and very clear number three in this lineup, and I think it will be no surprise to anyone where which film lands if he listened to this. My number three is The Great Cognito, which isn't funny and has the wrong priorities. So in this lineup, it's always going to be last.
I have to agree. My number three is also The Great Cognito. Despite really liking the animation, it's just one, it's just not that good, and two, it does not compare to these other two nominees. Number two.
My number two is The Snowman. Snowman is a beautiful film. It's gorgeous to look at. It's a bit sentimental, but I don't mind because it's just so gorgeous. It's a bit padded, which is probably its greatest detriment, but it's still a very beautiful and gorgeous short film.
My number two is Tango. While I do greatly appreciate the film, I do want to like go back and revisit it just to like really try and embrace everything the film has to offer, like you did for an hour earlier. Or at this point in time, it is not my favorite of these nominees, although I still do deeply enjoy it. And so that means your number one is
My number one is the film that actually is the best in this lineup. It's Tango. It's such an amazing, inventive, and really deep well. There's so much to see here. There's so much going on in this film. It's just fascinating to look. Every moment of this film has something to offer and somewhere to look at. As I said before, I spent more than an hour with this film today, and I do not regret a single minute trying to get to the bottom of the 21 loops, or possibly more, that make this film. It's such a great experience. It's such a unique film as well. I can only recommend it most heartily to everyone listening to this. It's really an absolutely great film.
in case you listeners couldn't tell, Christoph really loves Mr. Jabnewski's guy. Uh, but
Something.
yeah, but my number one is The Snowman, which it might be because of nostalgic value. The fact that I've known this film so much longer than I've known these other two nominees. One of the few nominees in this category that I imagine not only me, but many people listening to this have probably heard of outside of the best animated short category, because it is such a Christmas classic for people who are into that sort of thing. And it's a classic for a reason. It is gorgeous. It is so cute. It is so fun. It is something I could easily watch over and over again. It could make my heart warm enough to melt a snowman. And that just the tinge of bittersweetness as that ending just adds so much to it. And of course, like we were saying, the song that the Walking in the Air, such a banger. It's such a fucking good song. And it deserves more awards than it gotten, which is probably zero. I don't think the song has been given any awards, though I might be wrong. Maybe it has like a British Music Award, whatever their awards are called. But yeah, uh, so that's our lineup. Uh, before we end our show, are there any final thoughts you'd like to share, Christoph, or anything you'd like to promote?
I think promoting. I will say most people listening to you on a regular basis know me and are following me everywhere already anyway. So I'm just happy to be here, and I'm happy to be back in a few weeks again already to discuss a film I might even be a tiny bit more excited about than Tango.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like I love hearing about like when different guests come on the podcast and they talk to you about like the animated short category because they're unaware of it, but you always give them two recommendations. One of them is the Crunch Bird and one of them is Balance, the next film you're going to be talking about.
Yes.
And going back to the lineup we're actually talking about today, I wanted to bring up something we were saying before we were recording, which I think is something good to bring up in the episode. We were talking about how this lineup is a really good lineup to show people, like if they want to like get a good idea of the category. Like, of course, you could do your strategy of giving people the best and the worst, showing the best winner and the worst winner. But also, I think this lineup it does give a really broad idea of what this category has, what it's all about. Because you've got the Snowman, which represents the more traditional films of the lineup. And while I was watching it, I did think about like the early silly symphonies, the way the music really plays with the action on the screen. And then you get Tango, which represents, when they start being more accepting of the more artsy, the more foreign nominees. It's like, come on, you get it. Got a Polish film with no dialogue that's just a bunch of different people looping. It's like, it's weird, it's interesting, it has a lot of meaning, you can analyze it. It's like it, and there's a lot of winners and nominees that are similarly, I guess there's nothing quite like Tango, but in a in a different way, is just like there are a lot of films that you can look at in a similar way to Tango, like you could really dive into them. And then you have films like The Great Cognito, which is just the weirdest shit nominees that the Academy just randomly nominates sometimes, and sometimes even gives the award to. Who like I think it's next year that we're going to be talking about Sunday in New York, which is one of the few times that the weirdest shit nominees gets the actual win, and they're always fun to talk about, even though they might not be fun to watch.
Yeah, that's right. It's
Yeah.
it's such a lineup of three very, very different films, and even although it's only three nominees, it's a very broad spectrum that these films cover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just it's a solid lineup. Like two winners and a film that you might not enjoy. I guess there's no follow up to that part, but it's just it's something. Uh, it's just a solid lineup. It's a lineup that stands out, especially considering that like one of the nominees is actually well known outside the category.
Yes,
But yeah.
and it gave us a fantastic anecdote as well.
Oh yeah, of course. How could we forget the famous the famous story of Zbig's Big Night?
American Peak, I have Oscar.
American Pig, I have Oscar. All right. Well, thank you, Christof, for coming on the show, and thank you, listener, for tuning in. This has been the short podcast about short films. Until next time, goodbye.